We interrupt our program to bring you this important message.
One Foot in the Grave is the second book in Jeaniene Frost's urban fantasy paranormal romance series, the Night Huntress series. It was released in 2008 and was reviewed very positively. One thing's for certain, it is clear that Jeaniene Frost had an amazing series on her hands. I thoroughly enjoyed this installment of the series almost as much as I enjoyed the first. We get to see Cat evolve and solidify herself as the Red Reaper. We go along with her as she tries to navigate her heartbreak and new responsibilities, as well as new relationships and a new power dynamic. When we first meet back up with our illustrious Red Reaper, our red-headed vampire-human hybrid, it has been about, I'd say 4 to 5 years since the events in Halfway to the Grave, the previous book. Cat looks all human, but she is part vampire, and she is now 26 to 27 years old, working for the U.S. government, a covert branch of Homeland Security. Cat is their secret weapon as they wage a war against vampires. A vampire gets out of line and becomes a threat to humans. Cat and her boss, Don, despite all his flaws, were there to take no prisoners, defending those the law cannot protect on the day-to-day. She not only hunted for the government, but she trained her men intensely. Her captains, her foot soldiers, all her men were hand-picked by her. She would travel across the country, recruiting the best men law enforcement, the military, and even the criminal system had to offer. In fact, one of her captains, her friend, Juan, was wearing an orange jumpsuit, doing 20 years when she recruited him. She did not discriminate in who she hired. If they can survive her training and prove to be an asset in the field, she had a place for them in her deadly unit. I love to see the relationship between Cat and her team. When we first met Cat, she was living a life of isolation, a life in the shadows. And while the relationships that she is forging may not be romantic, it is definitely a start in her journey of finding and accepting herself for who and what she is. Cat has made quite a name for herself since we've seen her last. Rumors run rampant about her in the undead world, but no one really knows who she is, besides Dawn, her soldiers, and Bones, her vampire lover whom she fell endlessly in love with during the events of the first book. But she has not seen him for 4 years. Understandably, she is pining for him after all these years. So much so that when she stumbles across one of his closest friends, the man who sired him during one of her missions, she lets him go. Ian is Bones' sire, so although she's been tracking him because of his connection to a couple of murders, how she feels about Bones overshadows her mission, her duty, and she lets him go. Big mistake on her part. Not only does Cat reveal to Ian that she is a human-vampire hybrid when her eyes blaze green, but she reveals her identity as the vampire boogeyman, the Red Reaper. Ian, a collector of rare things himself, becomes fixated on Cat from this point on, becoming one of the main antagonists and conflicts in this book. He is determined to possess her and add her to his collection of rare things and people. But Cat doesn't know this just yet. In fact, she initially believes that Ian will not be a problem. So, she goes back to her life as a vampire hunter for the government. Unfortunately, it's not before long that things heat up for Cat and her men. They come under fire by a group of vampires hired to hunt her down by an unknown source to finish off this fabled Red Reaper. They did not succeed. In fact, Cat was able to finish them off. But unfortunately for Cat, her captains Tate, Cooper, and Juan, they lost a fellow captain in this fight, a brother. Their friend, Dave, a vampire, effortlessly ripped Tate's throat out. Cat tried to heal him with vampire blood from nearby shriveling corpses, But it was not enough. Kat could not heal Dave as fast as he was bleeding out. She couldn't help but to watch as the edges of his wounds closed, as the life drained from his eyes. Dave's death here is important for a couple of reasons. It shows just how dangerous her job is to the reader, so we can understand the implications of what she is doing out there, making enemies and putting a target on her back. And unfortunately, it seems as though the people she loves always have to pay. Things are not all bad for Kat, though. Her tiresome mother is alive, safe, and well. Kat has a new best friend whom she saved one night from being a vampire's next meal. Her best friend's name was Denise, and she knew exactly what Kat was and what she did for a living. Denise did not care. She loved Kat, and Kat loved her, which is why she followed Denise's advice to date Noah, the vet. This relationship bore no passion for Kat, and in fact, other than kissing, things never heated up at all. But as fate would have it, this relationship would not last long. So, get this. Denise fell in love and was getting married in a few days. So, Kat comes over and puts her enhanced strength to use and helps Denise's new fiancé, Randy, move his things into her house. So imagine Bones' surprise when Randy shows up to the bar where they were meeting that night, smelling like his long-lost love, Kat. You see, a few months ago, Randy and Bones sat side by side at a bar by sheer coincidence. An hour later, Randy turns to Bones and respectfully asks him, why hasn't he taken a breath in an hour? Here's where things get interesting. When Bones attempts to flash his green eyes at Randy in order to compel him into forgetting this interaction, it had no effect. It turns out, some people have a natural immunity to vampire power, including the influence that their eyes hold, and Randy was one of them. Randy and Bones got on famously after that, so much so that Randy asked Bones to be his groomsman. It was as Kat walked down the aisle ahead of the bride that she felt something in the air, that familiar twinge of vampiric energy. She scanned the audience and found nothing. It was not until she trained her eyes forward that she saw Bones, her English lover, her lost love. His breathtaking, creamy skin nearly stops Kat in her tracks, while his eyes seemingly bored into her soul. But thankfully, for the sake of her friend, Kat is able to hold it together for the big day. It was a tense reunion, to say the least. You can imagine Bones' frustration at the fact that Kat wouldn't trust him. Instead, she trusted the government, causing them to lose so much time, causing him years of misery. His love never wavered for her after all this time. In fact, his love still burned strong. He searched for her over and over, and after getting a new lead from Ian, he narrowed down her location to this area. It was as if fate interjected the night he met Randy because it led him back to Kat. Kat was apprehensive to be reunited with Bones, but eventually she decided to do things her way. She was miserable these last 4 years. Why not give love a chance? Why not throw all caution to the wind? Damn what her mother thought, what Dawn thought, what her team thought. She was ready for an actual chance at happiness. I feel like this is an amazing moment for Kat's character. I was rooting for her to do this from the jump. She deserves so much. Why always put yourself on the back burner at the cost of your self-worth, your happiness? It was about time her needs became paramount. It was time to live for herself. No longer putting her needs to the side, she breaks up with Noah and starts taking a chance on living her life with Bones by her side. Of course, they had to talk through issues which plagued, doomed even their relationship 4 years ago, such as her mother Justina and Justina's fear of Kat being turned into a vampire, which, if she stayed with Bones, Kat believed was inevitable. She believed that Bones wouldn't just watch her grow old and die. but Bones reassured her that he would not require her to change. In fact, at this point, he would not need to. I don't think that it ever occurred to Kat that, aside from murderous vampires who wants to kill her, she might actually live a very long natural life. I say this because, for one, she's half vampire. 2, she's never been sick. 3, her body heals at an accelerated rate. 4, she has never caught any transferable disease, any disease at that. 5, poisons and drugs have to be administered in large amounts to have effect on her. I mean, how can Kat reasonably think she would live an average lifetime? Yes, she breathes. Yes, she gets a period. Yeah, she has a heartbeat. So for all intents and purposes, she was alive in all the ways that mattered. But Bones also brings up something quite interesting. He brings up what she once told him, that her differences emerged most notably during puberty. He suspects that the hormonal surge may have triggered her Nosferatu traits, which continue to grow to this day. Her pulse and breathing, yes, they may make her easier to kill, but she was not human. He brings up a very good point when he notes that Kat hasn't aged a day since he saw her 5 years ago. Her skin hasn't changed at all. Not one line, not one furrow. Yeah, she's only 27 now, but still, there would be some difference in texture, in her pores, something, but there was nothing. Then there was the issue of the blood, the 2 pints of blood that Kat drank from him 4 years ago, before they stormed Hennessy's compound and rescued her mother. Kat would have done anything to save her mother, and since she thought they were going to die that night, feeding on Bones' blood was a safety measure. She hoped that his blood will heal her faster than Hennessy's men can take her apart, at least until she saved her mom. Feeding on master vampires such as himself would add 50 years to a normal human lifespan. What would it do to Kat? Double it? Probably. So it's not only clear to Kat, but also to me, that Bones has no reason to change her into a vampire. There's no need. With her mixed heritage and the regular consumption of his blood, Kat would live as long as she wanted to, exactly as she was. It wasn't before long, her boss Don and his entire team knew about her relationship with Bones. I wish that these characters, who were otherwise likable, didn't feel the need to police her dating life. She had to fight for it, fight and demand the respect that none of her male colleagues had to fight for. She had the right to date whoever she wanted to, pulse or not. They only went after harmful vampires, so why would they even deem Bones a threat? Well, Don is really worried about infiltration, and like her mother, he fears that Kat is corruptible, that Bones will be the undoing of his operation. Tate, on the other hand, well, he's in love with Kat, a fact that has not been kept a secret. Not only is Tate jealous, but he is hurt that he essentially lost any chance with Kat. Juan, though, is more easily swayed, as well as Cooper, who is a newer recruit into their operation. But Kat doesn't care about any of this, because as far as she's concerned, she loves her job. She loves protecting the innocent and bringing justice to the unworthy. She feels in her heart that this is her calling, and if they were on board with that, she would faithfully continue to do her job, whether she was in a relationship with Bones or not. Maybe Don had a right to be wary of Bones' presence, because eventually, Bones does wind up revealing a few of his secrets. One major secret being the true identity of Don. Turns out, he is Kat's uncle, brother to the vampire who impregnated her mother. Don was able to track Kat down so fast because he had already been tracking his brother, a rogue FBI agent turned vampire, when he stumbled across a pregnant Justina. He knew about Kat's existence all along and merely waited for the right moment to strike, which wound up being 4 years ago in Ohio when everything went down surrounding Governor Ethan Oliver. Naturally, Kat is angry that Don kept this all a secret for so long. Angry that, like her mother, Don gave a vendetta against vampires more value than her life. Nonetheless, it takes a while, But Bones is able to put the minds of Dawn and the rest of her men at ease when he helps them sniff out a rat in the operation who almost causes Kat's life to come to an end. Turns out, the rat was hired by Kat's father, Dawn's brother, Maximilian, antagonist number 2. When her father found out about the red-headed reaper that came from his loins, he wanted to end her before anyone else can make the connection. Upon discovering this threat to his operation, it was clear to Dawn that Bones, this vampire, only had Kat's best interests at heart, and it seems that he is not a likely threat for now. But something is clear to Bones. It is clear that Dawn and this entire operation is not sufficient enough or efficient enough to protect Kat's life. He decides that if Dawn wants Kat working for him, he would have to take him too, because no one would be able to protect Kat like he can. Yes, it's Dawn's and Kat's operation, so he will happily stand back and let them run the show, but he will be there to protect the love of his life. Bones also agrees to supply Dawn with his blood on a regular basis for research purposes, as well as to develop Brams, a super drug. Dawn claims that his scientists were able to filter through components of vampire blood, allowing them to make a wonder pill, one that repaired injuries, healed wounds, and cured internal injuries quickly, kinda like drinking vampire blood does. They named it Brams, after Bram Stoker. They have also been able to milk their vampire prisoners' fangs for a hallucinogenic toxin and reverse engineer a mind control substance that allows them to have the same mind control powers as vampires, which they use for situations such as wiping the minds of civilians, witnesses, or recruits who do not make the cut. But Bones doesn't stop there. He offers to sire vampires for Dawn. Keep in mind that Dawn does not know how to make vampires, and even so, vampires operate in a form of feudalism, loyal only to their sire. But if Bones sires vampires for Dawn, those vampires would also be loyal to Kat, and in turn, loyal to Dawn, since it seems as though her loyalties lie with him. Dawn just cannot pass up this offer. It's one thing to train humans in the hopes that they will be able to fight vampires. It's a whole other thing to bring your own vampires to the fight. Then there was the issue of Ian. He has staked his claim on Kat and won't stop at nothing to convince Kat to become part of his collection. As a result, Bones allies himself with millennia-old vampire Menkeres, an ancient Egyptian master vampire who is in fact Ian's sire from their stint in the penal colonies of New South Wales, or as we know it today, Australia. From this point on in the series, it is important for the reader to remember that although Menkeres is Ian's sire and Bones' grandsire, he has always been very close with Bones, almost favoring him above all. Menkeres shares his blood with Bones and makes him co-ruler of his line, merging all of the vampires Bones has sired into one line with Menkeres. Sharing his blood not only makes an act against Bones an act against Menkeres, but it also gives Bones some of the 4,000-year-old vampire's power. Also from that previously mentioned stint in Australia was Baron Charles de Mortimer. He goes by Spade because the overseer in New South Wales used to address him as such, due to that being his assigned tool. Spade was a digger. But Spade was here, and both he and Menkeres vow to back Bones against Ian in the hopes that they can resolve things without bloodshed. From there, Kat, Bones, and her team devise a plan where they were not only able to get Noah back safely, but Bones was able to use Ian's distracted state to coerce him into freeing Bones from his line, allowing Bones to become master of his own line. By this point, Bones has sired over 100, if not hundreds of his own vampires. He has been loyal to Ian for over 200 years, and before hundreds of witnesses, Bones is able to convince Ian to release him. But when Bones tries to claim Kat as his own, protected under his line, he was unable to do so, because when Kat openly challenged her father Maximilian, also sired by Ian, she basically acknowledged that she was sired by Max, and everything Max sires belongs to Ian, his master. But luckily for the pair of lovers, they are able to circumvent the effects of this detail by getting married on the spot. A vampire wedding, where they cut their palms, hold their hands, and declare themselves bound to one another for all of eternity. This meant that Ian would be starting a vampire war if he went after Kat now. Not only was Kat now protected under Bones' line, but so was Dawn and all of her men. With hundreds of vampires as witness, Ian was unable to ignore vampire tradition, nor the fact that his sireman Carries was here in support of Bones, so he conceded. Before they can live happily for now, though, another thing Bones was able to do for Dawn, for Kat, and for all of them was he could bring Dave back. He informed them that because Dave died with vampire blood in his system, they are able to bring him back as a ghoul. While vampires are made by being drained until the point of death and then subsequently refilled with vampire blood, to make a ghoul, a person had to feed on vampire blood, but not enough to heal themselves or save them after being mortally wounded. After death, a ghoul would remove the human heart and switch it out with their own, which is why the only way to kill ghouls is decapitation. They can survive without a heart. The ghoul that will be donating his heart in exchange for Dave's would be Rodney, a very close friend and associate of Bones. Once the heart is switched, you pour vampire blood into the cavity over the transplanted heart to activate the ghoul. Or, in this situation, Dave. He would still be the same old Dave, with all his memories and personality traits. The only difference is that he would eat flesh to sustain him. Although Kat and the team's stomach heaved collectively, they loved Dave. They wanted him back. They would accept him regardless of his diet. They missed him and wanted to waste no more time. Shortly afterwards, the cemetery where Dave was buried was closed off and heavily guarded. They even closed off airspace above the cemetery in anticipation of what was about to go down. It wasn't before long they flipped open the casket lid and was looking at Dave's cold, lifeless face. The process went pretty much as planned, although after placing Rodney's heart in Dave's chest, they needed a lot more of Bones' blood to reanimate Dave's corpse. They attributed that to the length of time that Dave was in the ground. Nonetheless, it works. Dave's finger twitched and his hand moved, followed by his toes and his feet. Looking up at his three friends, Kat, Juan, and Tate, Dave was trying to understand what was going on. They gently explained to him what was happening, that he was killed back in Ohio, and he has been brought back as a ghoul. They were standing in his grave. This was his coffin, where he just spent the last 3 months. He doesn't believe them at first. In fact, he thinks this is a prank for him breaking formation, a scare tactic. He didn't feel dead. He didn't remember dying. How can he be dead if he didn't remember that? Ultimately, it was Tate's tears, Juan's embrace, and the lack of his own pulse that finally convinced him. Dave's friends reassured him right then and there that regardless of what he is, he was their friend, their family. They would be there for him along this new journey, and that would never change.